Hello and welcome. Today we've got John Dowling, and today we're going to be discussing, and he's going to be showing us a presentation of what you would call the final phase of the currency reset, of the fiat currency reset, that is. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel where you can follow my newsreels. John, thank you so much for joining me. How are you, and what have you been up to?
Hey, Nicholas, welcome. Thanks for having me. Great to be back. And I just want to wish all the fathers this weekend a very happy Father's Day in advance. I've been busy just watching the information again, as I say all the time, just coming up. It's faster and faster. We're in the flood phase because we're at the final steps, like you said earlier. So I'm just trying to keep an eye on that and keep a level head, not get too high or too low, and keep my audience grounded so that they can be prepared for what's coming.
Absolutely, very interesting. And I just want to let the viewers know that um, next week I'll be interviewing Mark Z, who's very into also the currency stuff, which we're going to learn more about. But first, John, why don't you show us a presentation and let us know what are the main key points that we're going to be learning today?
Sure. So before I get started sharing the presentation, we're really going to be highlighting, Nicholas, where Iraq is in their stage, what Vietnam is doing quietly, surreptitiously behind the scenes, as they typically do, where Zimbabwe is at with their summer elections, and where we are as a whole in the global economy, given what we talked about last time. Now, officially, Saudi Arabia has abandoned the petrodollar, and they're looking to the RMB, the petro yuan, and many other instruments to trade away from the dollar and trade and commerce. So we'll be touching on that.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go for it.
That sounds good. Let me cue this up here. Okay, let me know when you can see my screen. Okay, so what we're going to be discussing today, as I said earlier. Okay, yeah, it takes a minute. So this is our final phase in the presentation, or in the summation of things, I should say, for where we are in the economic landscape of the world, I mentioned. And the key things we're going to be discussing, Nicholas, are watch the signs, be faithful, not fearful, and above all, stay prepared. Just keep your head on a swivel. And then there's two guys we've seen before in the past. Okay, so let's jump right in. This is going to be a much more succinct presentation since we're, as I said, at the end. So talking about Iraq. So everything, Nicholas, with Iraq is done from their end. Soudani has done his part. He's signed off on all documents. He's moved the needle for Iraq and his people to the precipice. What he's waiting on officially now is for, as we said before, Israel to make their final move. Now, interesting to denote, Nicholas, you'll see here on the left, Hezbollah has officially started striking the Israeli port of Haifa for the first time. Right? There was I don't know if you saw it on our Telegram, but I sent it to you offline. Hezbollah hit northern Israel the other day with 100 supersonic missiles. So Iran is doing their part in the narrative to inflame Israel to make their move. So you poke a lion or a bear enough, they're going to react, and that's the place where we are now. Okay, so Iraq is at an interesting place, Nicholas, in the aspect that they've done everything they need to do. Sudan has signed off on everything. He's moved the needle to the precipice for his people. We're just waiting for Israel and Iran to do their part. Now, interestingly enough, as I sent you offline and is on our Telegram here, you can see a couple days ago, this is from the Middle East Spectator as the source, in case those were statisticians and who like to know all the details. Hezbollah has officially started striking the Israeli port of Haifa for the first time. I believe it was yesterday we put in our Telegram, because the news is coming out so precipitously, that 100 hypersonic missiles were sent from Hezbollah in northern Israel. So Iran is doing their part in poking the bear, or the lion, if you like, in inflaming Israel to make their seminal move to hit those nuclear power plants that you and I talk about with regularity. Now, there's a video here I put on my Telegram, and I also sent to you over the weekend. Our team, which, by the way, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our wonderful team. My sister Judy, who helps me, we put these presentations together. John, Jerry, Carl, and a host of our team members, too numerous and humble to mention, that give us the information that makes this whole engine go. So I just wanted to pay respect and homage to them. So John actually found this video over the weekend and sent it to me, and we verified it. Back in May, when Soudani was in America, he did a TV show where he actually spoke English, where he doesn't do that often. But obviously, when you're a business leader of that caliber, you're going to be multilingual. but it's just not very common for him because we usually see him overseas in Iraq. But at any rate, he was speaking to this interviewer, and he clearly said that he's going to raise the value of the Iraqi dinar, and that was done back in May. We also, for those of you who want to do a reprise of the show, there's a hyperlink right here you can click on at the hour and 20 minute and 4 second mark. If you want the exact marking, you can go and listen to that speech where he says that specifically. Now, you'll see below here where my cursor is, Nick, that a couple days ago, it was announced that Iran is going to attack or has attacked Israel with hypersonic missiles. Interestingly to note, Nick, when that video came up, it was summarily removed. We know typically when they remove it, it's because it's true and they're trying to suppress it from the people. No surprise. But we wanted to screenshot that so people could see it did get out there first. I put in my Telegram this slide right here. I do a daily update on my Telegram, if you're not familiar, Nick, where I do the daily update of Iraq, and I give basically a summarization to my audience so they know where things are, bottom line. Basically, nothing happens till everything happens. And again, once Israel does this job, Iraq is going to pass the oil and gas law. Now, before we move on, some interesting information, Nicholas, came to light today. Nouri al-Maliki, who is an Obama holdover from 2010, said today that he wants to have early elections before the end of the year, and they want to remove Soudani. He's panicking because Soudani has removed the deep state money laundering, the dollar that they've been living off of, right? That drug is being summarily cut off. He knows his time is up, just like here in America, just like you've seen in Europe with, Marie Le Pen winning over Macron, and you see the Irish Prime Minister who's anti-immigration, who's removing that corruption. So the whole world sees the unmasking of the corruption happening right before their eyes, and it's no different here in Iraq. So he's starting to push the panic button because he knows the inevitable is coming. Okay, so we now move to Vietnam as the next update. A little bit more subdued and succinct here, but basically we're waiting for a sequence of events, Nicholas. We're watching for Russia to announce that they actually defeated Ukraine, which we all know that they have, because you wouldn't be, and here's how you wouldn't be going to rebuild areas of Ukraine, like Donbass and Lugansk, that are inherently Russian provinces. You have Russian nationalists who are loyal to Russia. They speak full Russian, right? You wouldn't be rebuilding those areas, giving them food and water if you were in the middle of a war zone. So we know that Russia's already defeated them. Everybody here in this movement pretty much knows that. So once they announce it, they're going to be running into the support with China to go into a 1 or 2 day invasion in Taiwan. And that's significant because, as we said before, that's going to free up Vietnam enough out of communism to power up their dong, the Vietnamese dong, and silver, Litecoin, oil, gold, and many other things that they possess that they are very tight-lipped about, right? You see the Vietnam tycoon here, Trong My Lan, was sentenced about, I think, 6 weeks ago to death for a $12.5 billion fraudulent scheme against the government. I don't have the equivalency of that in dong, but you get the gist. She's trying to appeal it. But as you know, in international courts, their laws are very different than America. They're not into a lot of appeals and motions and delays. They pretty much, when they send down an edict, that's the final verdict. And so they're making an example out of her to show that corruption in Vietnam is ending, which marries well with what Russia's about to do with China. And the reason that Russia and China are going to pair together, because they both have memorandums of understanding with Vietnam and Iraq, right? And they don't move off that needle. If they expect you to honor the agreement. So they need the dinar and dong to power up their military for the future. And they're not going to attack when Trump's, optically back. We already know that situation, what his real role is, right? But optically, they need to do it now while the proverbial drawbridge is down. So the timing for this summer is very, very good. According to Intel Slava, as the source, Vladimir Putin is going to visit North Korea and Vietnam in the coming weeks. Well, why would he be doing that? We just talked about it, right? He's getting them ready for the China-Taiwan invasion. Everything is coming together. When you can see the pieces, it's pretty easy to see. And we're just trying to help people kind of, put that together. And again, Russia bans all dollar euro trading on Moscow, with the Chinese yuan dominating. As we discussed earlier, the petro yuan is now officially over as of June 9th with Saudi Arabia. And this is another point of that tying together. Now we move to Zimbabwe. I'll let that get to your screen up for posterity. And what we're watching now, Nicholas, is really for Zimbabwe is Nelson Chamisa. He's working a lot with Emerson Mnangagwa, but that's not in the sense of corruption the way people used to think. It's for the aspect that Mnangagwa is basically passing over the torch because he knows he's going to have to concede, that the jig is up. The more corruption comes out, the more it's a black mark for him, or a black eye, if you will. So Chamisa is saying here, I'm watching South African election results. I'm impressed with the standards and efforts and professionalism, transparency, and accountability and inclusivity, to our point a minute ago. When you compare Zimbabwe, it's with the old system, it's clearly a shame. So we already know that they've tucked in their ZiG gold-backed dollars from the old system. And once he's back, the elections, as I understand it right now, Nick, are August 23rd. Once he's optically back, then he's going to immediately tuck in the bonds. So nobody needs to be concerned about it. They're not going to miss out on anything. I get this question from my audience all the time. They will absolutely put the bonds inside the ZiG with the dollars, and it'll be one currency backed by digital gold. Okay. So you can see here the monetary policy converted to ZiG. All old notes, here's a key right there, Nick, right there. All old notes and bonds will be accepted by the banks. So they're kind of telling you without telling you. And we can see right here, as we said before, right clearly it denotes on the 100 trillion, I promise to pay to the bearer on demand. So possession, 9/10 of the law. Now, this came out a couple of days ago, IMF mission to assess new ZiG's currency impact on Zimbabwe's economy. Basically, they're, in layman's terms, they are acknowledging that Zimbabwe is moving away from the dollar and moving into the gold, and they're documenting it for officiality, for lack of a better term. So that's where we are with Zimbabwe. And you can see here, he's continuing to claim his allegiance. Faith in God is indispensable to successful statesmanship, quoting Abraham Lincoln, interesting enough. We know where he stood with his faith. Now we turn our attention to the mechanisms that have been a disconnect for a lot of people, which is to say gold and silver, right? So gold and silver are the backbone for the new economy in digital form. You can see Basel III is killing the US dollar and all the manipulation. The Bretton Woods Agreement is officially done. We can see how BRICS is really powering up in gold, and we obviously know why. This week, the Supreme Court made a very ruling that state-sponsored banks can ban from the Federal Reserve System and issue their own currency. So, Nicholas, we talked about this in the last show. Here's a visual for your audience. What President Trump did very wisely and astutely during the pandemic in 2020 is he did two critical things in this regard. He tucked the Federal Reserve into the Treasury, and he also allowed states to secede away from the union or the corporation. So states can make up their own laws. They can also use gold and silver as legal tender, which is no coincidence why you see, I think it's either 42 or 44 states, don't hold me to that, have removed taxes on gold and silver as legal tender because they're positioning real money, precious metals, to back their individual states. Tennessee is doing it, Texas is doing it, Florida and many other red states and the like. So as of May 30th, this happened. Doing simple math marks the fundamental value of gold at $25,000 an ounce and silver at $417 per ounce. Now, my humble opinion and our team's opinion, we believe it's going to go significantly higher than that, as the federal treasury bond yield notes that are basically tied to the dollar's debt, as that gets whittled away and you see more than 10% correction, you're going to see that spike. I interviewed with Jim Woolley over a week ago, and he said this year he sees gold at $17,000 and silver at $700 an ounce, just to give you another source to back that up. Okay, so economist Harry Dent, who's well known in the financial world, is predicting what we know, that this market crash will be worse than 2008. It's the bubble of all bubbles, because that was just real estate in 08 in America. This is the entirety of the world's economy. So it's pretty common sense for people in your channel, but we just want to show that for posterity once again. And then this is a video that was circulating, I believe you had on your channel as well, petrodollar to end on June 9th. We now know that officially happened. And again, we know that because Saudi Arabia has officially announced that they're going to be using the Petro Yuan, the RMB, silver, gold, and eventually XRP and many other things as trading instruments for oil, right? And so that proves that China is running the show in this respect under the auspices of the BRICS. So for us as currency holders, crypto holders, precious metals, that's a very, very good thing. Okay. So speaking of the BRICS nations, just an overall summary of everything, which it consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa as the main branches of BRICS, started back in 2009. What I wanted to highlight here, Nicholas, that there are 3 new countries that are being welcomed in by Putin in the BRICS: Turkey, Singapore, and Nicaragua. And there was a report by another podcaster, Lena Petrova, I believe her name was. I saw it yesterday. There's 59 total countries this year getting ready now. It's almost double the amount we reported of 30. We expect it to be many, many more in the coming months and years as this rolls out in front of scenes of countries that are going to be running into the safety and shelter of the BRICS, because no one, and I mean no one, wants to hold the dollar, including us, meaning the US. So this came out. China warns its citizens visiting the United States to take safety and precautions. That was back, when was that? That was, let's see, that was back in March, the end of March. But it's just a preparation for, again, what we're seeing coming out now. He's just warning his people that, what's coming into, position themselves out of the old mindset that they've had. So again, this thing is just going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger in the near future and beyond. So I think what pretty much covers that. Interesting comms, Nick, on the U.S. debt clock. This came out a couple of days ago. This is the newest one that I've seen. Notice that it's in gold. It's a gold frame, or it's a gold background. So wanted: high crimes against the American people, the Fed. What does the Fed represent? The dollar. Counterfeiting, money laundering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, fraud, and racketeering. Everything nefarious, right? So they're putting them on notice, that the public on notice. It's a screenshot that their days are done. Now, we caught this as a screenshot because if you know the debt clock, Nick, you know that they put up these comms and they take them off. And a lot of people go and say, well, I didn't see it. Well, because it happens at random points in the day or the night. But, patriots and truthers like us, our team catches this stuff for the benefit of the people collectively. So in this screenshot, according to the U.S. debt clock, the U.S. is now the largest holder of gold reserves in the world at 286,916,192 ounces. And the debt clock is now showing a dollar to silver ratio at a dollar to gold ratio. That's critical. This changed in the last 24 hours. You see here, a few days ago, somebody caught this. The national debt is zero, which in our opinion clearly is the debt jubilee, also known as Jassara. That is definitely showing proof that they've already done it, and they're just rolling it out very slowly and systematically. Yes, slower than a lot of people would like, but God's timing is perfect. He knows what we don't know and what we don't yet see. Okay, so that pretty much summates that. So my last points in this presentation, Nick, as I said, would be succinct, is being prepared with faith, not fear. And the ways that you do that are becoming your own central bank, right? Having the right foreign currencies. We talk about this all the time. Having gold and silver, having the right cryptos that are backed, gold and silver, copper and other things, food and water sources, simple things, flashlights, batteries, medications for yourself or your pets, getting a source out of the major cities, having a water source, getting off the electrical grid. If your land has oil and gas reserves, all the better. Partner up in the community, work with farmers to get your food, and hire them as consultants to show you how to grow your own food and live off the land. Synergize. We must come together, Nick, as a community. For far too long, the deep state has kept people separated in ego and pride, and it's all about them and me, my, and I can do this on my own strength. That's the enemy. But God is trying to synergize his people to come together collectively, particularly at this time. So know how to approach your currency exchange. Be aware of your responsibility and information sources. You are in the driver's seat. You don't need to hire anybody for consulting to know how to exchange. It's just an exchange. There's no tricks. There's no special words you have to use. There's not an alien that's going to check your heart light to make sure your heart is pure. I mean, it's the stuff that we're hearing out there is just, it's erroneous at best. So it's not complicated. It's just an exchange. On our channel, once the reset comes to fruition, we're going to do a 15-minute video with a banker, and we're going to show people how simple it is to do the exchange. Bring one note, go in a location where you don't live, bring a buddy system, and just common sense things, basically. nurture your own faith and foster around you. I talked about that a minute ago. There is going to be a brief shutdown, whether it's 3, 7 days, 2 days, no one knows. But they don't want to have civil unrest. I mean the Patriots, the military, the good guys here do not want to hurt the people. They're trying to do this slowly and systematically in order to eliminate and reduce as much collateral damage as possible. So whatever that time period is, just be prepared. Don't be afraid. Just take the precautions and you'll be fine. You'll survive the shutdown, but how you do so will dictate your comfort and your peace of mind. And then be about helping others. If you have neighbors who are elderly, who don't know, who can't help themselves or compromise, just help them. I have a neighbor I do this with quietly every so often. If I come into something, if I have extra of something, I just quietly bring it over to them. And I just, very quietly and surreptitiously. There's no need to cause attention to myself. Just be in service. It's really very simple. Have cash. And I would say also, Nicholas, this is important. Have ones and fives. Don't just count on 20s and hundreds. If you're going to a farmer's market and they're only taking cash, you don't want to be paying $20 for a banana or an apple, right? So if you have ones, it makes it easier for them. They don't have to break it. They'll probably give you a better deal, most likely. Build relationships with farmers markets in your neighborhoods. Another good example. And then also, this is a simple thing, but it's important, Nick. We recommend people get onto Signal app itself. That's a military-based app, so it is safe. Get your family and friends that will listen onto it. Write down a list of the most important phone numbers on paper, right? Because if the grid does go down for a day or 2 days or whatever it is, and you need to reach out to people, you're gonna have to have a fail-safe. So that is something that we recommend. Just do your diligence at every possible turn. There's simple, free things that you can do in this that are not hard and will really give you that peace of mind that you're looking for. And then finally, as Judy put this together aptly, we are not warriors because we choose to be. We are warriors because God has called us to be. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much. That was a very good presentation. I want to go back to the debt clock, right?
Thanks.
First of all, how do we know who's in charge of the debt clock?
Well, we don't. Yeah, there's been some research on that, and there's a gentleman who was a tech expert who started it. But I think we know that the Patriots and the military have taken over that debt clock from the creator and are putting out those comms, because somebody who's nefarious wouldn't be telling you this information. It would be in their best interest to keep the old system up at status quo. So we don't know exactly militarily who's running it. But we know based on the comms we're getting that it's on the right side, because the bad guys would not want this information out.
Have any credible people like Donald Trump, Linwood, Sidney Powell, anyone up in the government who have ever mentioned the US debt clock?
I haven't heard them mention it, no, but I wouldn't be surprised if behind the scenes they are.
Okay. So the other thing is, I want to speak about, if the BRICS group, which is growing, and we're all moving into gold, a gold-backed currency, which gives us purchasing power. What happens to fiat currency as we know it today? What would happen to that? Would it just disappear? Would it have no value?
Well, let's break down that question in a couple of ways, Nicholas. Are you referring to the Federal Reserve note or the new Treasury note that's coming out?
The Federal Reserve note, because I understand that the Treasury note that's going to come out is going to be gold-backed.
Correct. So we just did a video. I sent it to you as well, with a woman who went into Best Buy and she talked to a bank manager, and people can reference that on your channel or mine. And she said that she talked to the bank manager. She said, "You signed an NDA, didn't you?" She said, "I did." She said, "Are we going back to a gold-backed note?" She said, kind of nodded her head, yes. And she said, "Well, what's the plan?" And the banker said, "There is a plan. I don't know exactly what it is, but they are going to roll out a gold-backed U.S. Treasury note in place of the Federal Reserve." So the Federal Reserve will just be removed. Here's the easiest way, Nicholas, that I visualize it for people. I don't know if you're a sports fan or not in England, soccer, what have you, here, football, American football in America. You take an old stadium that you've visited, and they're building a new stadium 400 yards away. I don't know what the conversion is, a stupid American that I am, the metric system, but they move it, in close proximity to, the old stadium. And the Federal Reserve would be the old stadium, the Treasury note would be the new stadium. Once the season's over, this looking metaphorically as a season, once the season's up, they turn off the lights and they implode the old stadium inward to itself so that it doesn't create collateral damage to the new stadium, dust and debris and the like. It's what we call a controlled demolition. So they will just systematically implode the Federal Reserve into itself, and the banks will switch out with a new asset-backed note. And I don't think it'll be 100% gold. I don't know what the percentage will be, but it'll be some gold, it'll be some silver.
Yeah.
Could be other things, platinum, copper, what have you. But that's how they'll do it.
So with the fiat currency that's under the Federal Reserve that you're saying that will implode, which I believe too, we have mortgages, credit card loans, the whole world, right? We are in debt to this Federal Reserve. Now, if they implode, what's going to happen to our contracts? Because if it's imploding for the reason that they're running fraud, they're printing loads of money, it's not backed by gold, it's illegitimate, it's illegal, then what's going to happen to all of the loans that we've taken out under that corrupt system? By moral and by law, it should be null and void. Is that really going to happen?
Yes, because we're going back to constitutional republic, constitutional, not maritime law in the corporation. All loans were fraudulent and illegal because they were done without our consent and knowledge. When they take $1 in the old system, you put the dollar bill in the bank. They inject it with steroids, and they take $10 out and they loan that money out to other people in the forms of what you talked about: mortgages, credit cards, student loans, medical bills, the like. And that's how banks have subsisted, is on debt. Debt is an artificial, fraudulent system. Now, we talked earlier in the presentation about Basel III. Here's a great way to use that example. Basel III, which is under Switzerland, which is not as neutral as people think or have been told, it forces the banks in parlance to disclose transparency of how much gold and silver they have on their balance sheets. So if they don't have the gold and silver in their possession to back the new currency, they're gone. So the banks that are going away that have debt notes on clients can't recuperate them because they're out of business. When you're out of business, you can't go after anybody because you're insolvent. So those banks that go away, those debts will already be automatically removed. The banks that will survive, I've heard Bank of America is going to be one of the first on the chopping block. That's been going on for years. There's been talk about a merge with them, with another bank. But all that debt will be removed. Now, I hear the same arguments and frustration from people. I haven't got my debts forgiven. I haven't seen it, me, my eye. You will. There have been people, I've seen it, you've seen it. I have at least 50 cases of people who said, hey, my credit cards got removed, student loans, mortgage. A mortgage, if you look it up under Black's Law, 4th edition, is a prison debt, right? Or debtor's prison, to be precise. So I'm sorry for the verbosity, but the point is for the audience to get something meaty. Yes, it will go away because we won't be on a central bank system. Now, I do need to add one thing, Nicholas. This is very important. There is a very inherent difference, and I want to quote X22 because he came out with this last week. So I always give credit where credit is due. He made a very good point, Nicholas, that went under the radar. There's a difference between a central bank, right, and a private Western central bank. And people are like, what's the difference? A central bank, which every country has, Japan has it, England has it, America, everyone has it. When you're in the Constitution, the people control the money. They own it. They can trade it for gold and silver. They can move with it. They can barter with it. There's freedom. The private Western central bank under the Rothschild system, we don't own the money. They created artificially interest in debt. We can never trade it for gold and silver. And you know this because if you go in a bank right now and try to do it, they're going to look at you like you have 3 heads. So that's how you know we're under a fraudulent system. When we go back to the Constitution optically, which you and I both believe we're kind of already in that process, right? As we see things shifting, people will be able to do it. They'll be doing it digitally. So our great grandparents could take a paycheck, go to the bank in the old days and say, hey, I want $100 in silver and $200 in gold. And they could do that. We're going to be able to do that again, but it'll be digitally under, and I know some people have their opinions about digital. I understand that, which is why we say hold gold and silver. You'll have a combination because you still have a faction of society that's older who is comfortable with physical cash. And the Trump administration and the Patriots understand that. So they're not going to remove it. What they're going to do is give it real value, which goes back to your previous question. So in closing, yes, the debts will be forgiven. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to move away from a private Western central bank to a decentralized central bank that it's the people's money they control.
Interesting. Okay, great. So, and now I want to go back to dinars and Vietnamese dong and, the Iraqi dinar, and they're saying that they're going to revalue it and they'll be using the old notes and stuff like that. Now, we understand that these currencies are very, very weak. And the reason why they're weak is because they've been suppressed by the deep state, and the Federal Reserve applies currency manipulators on these currencies. Now, in short, can you tell us, why are they going to revalue? What's the purpose?
Okay, so as best as I can summate it, first of all, they were never weak. They were perceived weak because the people were brainwashed to believe that they were worthless and their currency was thereby worthless. And that was done over many, many generations of mind control and inculcation. Same in America, same in London. They're going to reinstate, because Iraq and Vietnam had been here before. They had value previously before the US deep state slammed them down. So they're coming back to return to center. So they're going to come back because of two reasons: because of historical replication I just mentioned, and now they cannot hide behind the dollar. They have to show, in the new digital economic reality, they have to show their wares, right? They can't hide behind a curtain of the Wizard of Oz. They have to show it. So they have to back their currencies and everything that they have in the ground. In Iraq's case, it's gold, silver, oil, diamonds, phosphorus, and many other things. Vietnam, same situation. So they're going to be forced to be transparent, because nobody can rely on the dollar anymore. If they can't rely on the dollar, they're going to have to go somewhere else. They're going to have to power up in their own currencies. Vietnam's government 2 months ago said that they were going to power up the Forex for the dong. You just heard Sudani, or you'll see in the video, where he says he's going to raise the value, because now everything is front and center. There's no war. There's no cover story. There's no cloak and dagger. Everything is being, forced to the middle. So that's why they're moving at this time.
Now, to get Iraqi, if I have 1 million Iraqi dinar, or 1 million Vietnamese dong, which is peanuts in dollars, right?
Right.
When it revalues approximately 1 for 1, now, will I become a millionaire?
Yes.
We've seen the Kuwait dinar that revalued quite a few years ago, and it's much more expensive than the dollar. So
Right.
if you had 1 million Kuwait dinar, you would have several millions, because it's like $2, $3, $4 to the Kuwait dinar. I haven't looked for a while, but I know it's a lot more than the dollar. And this is going to happen to the Vietnamese dong, and even the Zimbabwe and the Iraqi dinar, but the Zimbabwe as well. And they'll be redeemed as bonds, because they're printed on bond paper. Can you explain that part, please?
On paper, you mean?
Yes.
Sure. Well, a currency is owned by the bank, basically, right? Like the US dollar. A bond is owned by the government. And when the government assesses a value to it, which, again, they in the past were saying there was no value, which is not true. They didn't want people to be free. So they lied to people and said it had no value when it was, because they were holding the cards. When the government deems it valuable and at a certain rate, that's what gives that note, whatever it is, purchasing power, extreme value. Now, I do want to add, Nicholas, I had a friend, Tyler, who passed away, God rest her soul, a couple of years ago. Her father in 1992 was holding a lot of Kuwaiti dinar. And similar to the historical replication, they burned the oil fields. Does that sound familiar, what we're talking about Israel's about to do? Historical replication. And they told the people the Kuwaiti dinar was never going to happen. A day or two later, the brokers called their clients and said, hey, it's in for purchase. And we're going to see almost exactly the same thing happen here. So I want your audience to be aware of that. When it happens, they're prepared. Don't panic by what you think you see, but what's happening behind the scenes. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, of course, absolutely. I think everybody, I know a lot of people who are making sure they've got some silver, they've got gold, they've got Iraqi dinars, they've got Vietnamese dong. And this is what we call the wealth transfer to the people from the bad guys. And this is why the bad guys really don't want Trump to come back in, because Trump is a people's president. But it's very interesting, very exciting as well. If our lives are going to change, they're going to get rid of the debt. They're going to get rid of the majority of the tax. This is what we want. We want to create freedom again, freedom, peace, where it works for the people. I'm going to leave a link below if you would like to know more about currencies. But John Dowling, it's been an absolute honor to have you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
Yes, please. And thank you again, Nicholas, for the honor of your time and your audience to share this presentation. I want to add one thing on the back to what you just said that will give the audience some interesting perspective. The Fed yesterday just announced that they're going to do one rate cut now instead of two or three for this year. That virtually guarantees President Trump's candidacy, because you would think as a deep state they would do several rate cuts because it would give the illusion of releasing some of the inflation, taking some of the pressure off people's paychecks, the gas and groceries and everyday sundry things. But no, they're saying they're going to let people suffer temporarily, which guarantees his return. So that should tell you something right now who's really running the show, and it's not what it seems. And the other thing, that doesn't mean they can't change their mind and do another rate cut. And I would suspect they will, but that's what they're saying at the moment. That's what the significance of Powell's message yesterday in the Fed meeting was. The final thing is folks, just stay patient as much as you can. Keep your faith in the Lord. Don't be rattled by how things appear. We're all suffering. We're all going through stuff. We're not unsympathetic. But the key is to stay focused and faithful and keep your emotions as much in check as you can. And we must ride this storm out together and cross the finish line winning.
Absolutely. Well, John, thank you very much. And we'll speak again very soon. You take care and God bless. Bye-bye.
God bless.